Unfortunately, the value of an umbrella in Badagry was 40 human beings.
Say that one more time.
The value of an umbrella was 40 human beings.
So for 40 people,
yes, this umbrella.
You get an umbrella.
In Badagry,
come on.
That's the value.
Who established these values? Like, who thought it was a good idea, or that the value of 40 human beings for an umbrella was a good idea, or sound business, made business sense? Who came up with this?
No, the idea of the umbrella. If you study the Arabs, the origin of this umbrella, of the use of umbrella, did not begin in Europe. It was in Asia and Arabia. In Asia and Arabia, they were using it, and the first slaves, they were sold to the Portuguese, to the Italians, they were sold to the Spanish, other places in Europe, where the slaves were sold by the Arabs. The slaves were sold by the Arabs to the Europeans. Okay, and they have the knowledge of some of these things. But you see, when the Europeans began to deal directly, the Portuguese came, they were dealing with West Africans. They used some of the knowledge they have with the Arabs to deal, because even the slave trade that they came and they established, they learned it from the Arabs. Okay? But you see, they made the chiefs, they made the emir, they made the kings feel like they are more important than the ordinary man on the street, and that they needed something to differentiate them from the ordinary man on the street, and they came with the idea of the umbrella. Okay, and of course they placed value on the umbrella, and they made the umbrella to be very, very valuable and important.
I'm still in shock that for one umbrella you would sell 40 people for one umbrella. I'm still in shock over that.
They practice what they call trade by barter. Trade by barter at that time. Unfortunately, those who set the price were not the Africans. It's like oil business, oil and gas business.
Right. But I'm under the impression that the African would think that 40 people for an umbrella is not a fair trade. You know what I mean? I would think.
It depends on, for instance, the value of an umbrella in Badagry was 40 slaves. The value of a bottle of alcohol was 10 slaves. Okay, 10 slaves. The value of a Dane gun was 40 slaves in Badagry. A ceramic bowl was 10 slaves in Badagry. The big cannon gun, which was like the bomb that time, the big one was used in exchange for 100 slaves. The small one for 40 slaves. But you see, the Europeans were the ones who placed value on some of these items. I was trying to tell you that.
So they didn't want to negotiate back then.
Of course, they would have negotiated. They would have negotiated. Okay, but I think it's all born from my opinion. I may be wrong, but I think it still has to do with greed to an extent. Okay, or maybe selfishness to an extent. But you must understand that they were not the one they were calling the shot. In the world today, people who want to buy the oil, who want to buy petrol, they are the one who set the price of petrol.
Correct.
It is not those who own the oil, who owns the petrol, that determines how much they sell the petrol. I think it's the same old story system. It's this old.
It's the same systems in place, right?
That is still on ground.
But so, I mean, Africans are still getting the raw end of the deal. They're not. It's not a good deal. The system's not a good.
It's not a good deal.
It doesn't benefit Africans. But my question is, why do we continue to allow ourselves to be exploited?
That is why it is good for people like you and I to conscientize our people to go around, because there are so many things that took place during the slave trade that are carpeted. We need to review some of this information, especially for young people, so that they become conscious of some of this information, so that we know that we are a people. We're a people that have pride. We're a people that have kingdoms, that have empires. We were educated. For instance, we talk about the Imale slave revolt in Brazil. Now, the Imale slave revolt in Brazil, now, how did they come about that word Imale? Now, in Yoruba land, I tell people, it was not the Fulanis who brought Islam to Yoruba land. Okay? It was actually the Malians. Because of the law for education that the Yorubas had, there was a university in Timbuktu. and they know the value of education. So the Yoruba merchants were sending their children to the university in Timbuktu, in Mali. And when they come back home, they had a different religion, which was Islam. So when they referred to them, and the way they dressed became different. They were dressing like the way they dressed in Mali in their own that time. So to identify them, they said, and when let's see in Mali, the followers of the religion of Mali. So it was Mali that became Imali and became Imali. So, and those that are called Elesi Imali were Muslim Yorubas. So in the revolt in Brazil, the Imali revolt was actually a revolt by the Yoruba Muslims in Brazil that time. Because the origin of that word Imale or Malay was actually from Yoruba land here. So it was possible that some of the people they were captured were already Muslims here before they were even taken down to that place. Okay. We have other places. Going to jail. All the rooms here are barracks. All the rooms here, and
so people now live in the barracks.
People live in the barracks, which is an irony. And this compound is the property of the federal government of Nigeria. But you can see what a national monument looks like. And like I wrote in one of my articles, in this town, this is the only evidence of the slave trade. It's not about some of the slaving chains. It's about where this is where they kept them. And you saw what the rooms looks like.
Right.
So if this compound should fall, because Seki Aba's house, that's the foundation over there. Okay, where this car is parked, that's the foundation. And the building collapsed in 1995. You saw the picture of a story building that fell. So how long will this compound stand? And you can see that they are amended. And nobody ought to live around here.
Right.
Okay.
So you don't agree with people living in the slave quarters, but
it is a sacred place.
Yeah, but it's the irony is that me being a descendant of the slave trade and coming back, you know, my ancestors were put in these barracoons to be sold, and it's just the fact that Nigeria, as a whole, me personally, I believe they have nothing to show for the slave trade, to the point that now the people that weren't sold now have to live in the barracoons.
They were what? They were once sold.
The people who weren't sold now are the descendants.
No.
Now live in the barracoons.
No. The people that live here rented the rooms. They are not the descendants of those that were sold.
No, I'm saying they're not the descendants. They're the descendants of those that weren't sold.
No. These people needed an apartment.
Right.
And they met some of the family who rented. They paid to live here. These people paid to live in this compound.
It's not for free.
It's not for free.
It's not for free, but
It's not
still.
like
It's just still. All right.
It's not.
But
people
still.
came, met some descendants of Seki Abas. They paid them to allow them to stay here.
Yeah, it's just the irony.
It is.
Just have nothing to show for it. That's what I believe.
But the point is this.
What I'm saying is the European got rich and wealthy. African have nothing. They lost. Gain anything.
Africans did not gain anything from the transatlantic slave trade.
Right.
Nigeria did not benefit anything from the transatlantic slave trade. Benin Republic did not benefit anything. Togo did not benefit. Ghana did not benefit. Angola did not benefit. Senegal, no African nation benefited from the transatlantic slave trade.
Right.
If you go to Ghana, what you see are the forts and the castles.
Right.
That have no direct benefit to the people, except the tourism potentials that it has now.
And not to be the angry black man. I'm about to be the angry black man. Do you know when I go to Goree Island or when I go to Elmina Castle in Ghana, that I have to pay the same price to enter the slave dungeon as the white man, as the European, the same price.
Now, these are some of the things we have to sit down and discuss. For instance,
right.
we have black people in diaspora
Right.
who are so concerned about events going on in Africa, like you are.
Right.
Why should our cousins who really want to come home, why do they have to get visa? Why do they have to pay so much visa fee to come back home?
Correct.
Probably there should be criteria for those who are interested in coming home. And we should encourage them to come home. Because the visa fee, somebody was telling me about visa fee.
Yeah, I paid my visa. The visa to come to Nigeria was altogether was about 275 USD, which is a lot but to go to Senegal, they don't charge if you have a U.S. passport. There's no visa fee. So there are a lot of countries in Africa that as long as you have a U.S. passport, you don't have to pay a visa fee. You just enter as long as you have a U.S. passport. But Nigeria was $275. You know, it was just, and I'm wondering, where's the money going? No.
The point is, you see, I can sense the consciousness in you. We have to right the wrong, right. We have to do the right thing. You see Nigeria, you see the state port of Lagos,
right,
Lekki, Badagry, Ekpe, Calabar. You see, the biggest slave port was actually the one in this country today called Nigeria.
Right.
So we have to come on a round table and actually discuss these issues, because there are more people in diaspora who really want to come to Nigeria, and we have to encourage them. We are promoting Nigeria, we are promoting Benin Republic, we are promoting West Africa, because a lot of our people were actually taken from this coast.
Correct.
And I like to talk about Angola too, because a lot of them were also taken from those places. But our people, they were taken away. We really need to reconnect them with the motherland, because this is actually their home. It is important.
Right. Because, and the thing I was saying, again, when I brought up as far as the residents living now in the barracoons, is again, you would think the way Europe got rich, how white people got rich, how the West got rich off the slave trade, you would think that some of that wealth that the people in Badagry would have got rich as well. They have nothing to show for it. That's the irony behind it.
Africans, they were involved, or we're part of the collaboration, honestly.
You would just like when I go to Europe. When I go to Europe or in America, nice roads, wealth everywhere, everything's clean, you know, and that started because of the slave trade. Capitalism through the slave trade. So you would think that, you know, Africa would be as wealthy or even more wealthy because of the slave trade.
No, let me tell you,
but they're not. But then I see that they were trading the slaves for umbrellas and alcohol and rusty muskets and cannons, and then you understand why.
Now, you must understand this. You must understand that, you see, the transatlantic slave trade or the trans-Saharan slave trade is very deep. You see, after the abolition of the slave trade, I told you that it didn't really stop. They stopped on paper. People were still doing it illegally. And some people were given permits, and you saw one of the permits. Okay? They changed this method. They changed the policy. And from the slave trade, it became colonialism.
Correct.
They didn't go. Okay? They didn't go. They stayed back. They used every opportunity to stay back. What they did was that they changed the policy
and the pattern.
They changed the style of enslaving the people. Okay, we don't want the slave trade anymore. Okay, now we want you to be developed. We want to build schools for you. We want to build churches for you. We want you to be civilized. You are pagan. This is the dark continent. We want you to live the way we live in Europe. So they gave a lot of excuses and they stayed back here. And they said they are reorganizing the lifestyle of the people. But while they are doing that, they said they are civilizing. They continue to take more natural resources from Africa to Europe. So it elongated their stay. So they now have a legal stay in this place. So it will be difficult for you to go to court and fight them. So because they made the law and they used colonialism, that policy of colonialism, to make them remain here in Africa. So it wasn't as if after the transatlantic slave trade that they left. They didn't leave. For instance, Nigeria became independent in 1960. Became a republic in 1963. Benin Republic became independent in 1960. Okay? And every other country now we're becoming independent. Other African countries were becoming independent. You see, that was actually when they were living. A lot of them left in the 60s. Some left, like in Ghana, 1957. But while they were living, they didn't finally leave. They put their own people in government.
Right.
In some quarters. So they continue to dominate. That is why, look at Nigeria for instance. Why is it that they didn't get it politically? The human resources here is huge. And human resources is more important than natural resources. Nigeria have human resources, they have natural resources. Benin Republic have human resources, have natural resources. Ghana have natural resources, human resources. What have we made from those resources? They continue to stay. That was what I mean when I said, when they first came, they practiced what they call divide and rule. And unfortunately, in some African countries, the politicians themselves are now practicing the same policy of divide and rule among the different ethnic groups. So the basis of the problem that Africa has began when they first came. So some of us are even making use of the same style among ourselves because you want to continue to dominate. Prosperity, you want wealth, you want all that. But when the people become conscious, when the youth have this information, they realize that, look, we have to do something about this. Africa is rich. Why are the people poor?
Right.
For instance, Nigeria is very rich.
Very rich.
Nigeria is a very rich country.
Very rich.
But why is it that majority of the people are poor? But the country is very rich and few people are rich. The same thing when you go to some other places in Africa. They came. Divide and rule policy and slavery, colonialism, imperialism, they brought in nepotism, that is, they put their own people there, and we are doing the same thing. So it won't work. Those are the basics of our problem. So when they came, how come we are not really making anything? Because they never left Africa. They didn't.
Right.
They never left. So they continue to stay. They continue to plunder the natural resources. And some other countries are coming in this generation now. A country that you know now is everywhere in Africa. It's the same style.
China. USA.
The same style.
America.
Using different methods of coming. Like you are developing the people, you are developing
and enslaving them.
Unconsciously. See, the worst type of slaves were those who don't know they are slaves. During the transatlantic slave trade, during the Saharan slave trade, at least the people of that time knows that they were slaves. That was why we had what they call runaway slaves. Because they know that they are slaves, they try to escape. But people who are slaves and don't know they are slaves, they won't look for a way out. That's the problem. Mental slavery is the hardest type of slavery. So the youth need to come up. It's not about fighting each other. It's about coming to a consensus. It's about reaching an agreement and doing the right thing. It is very, very important.
Let me ask you this last question. Do you believe that the slave trade opened the door for colonialism?
For my opinion, I think they already have their master plan of what to do. It wasn't as if they just thought of colonialism. It is what they have practiced elsewhere. It's repetition. They were only repeating what they did that worked in other places. That was it. So it was not a mistake. So to answer your question, of course, it opened the door for it. And events that took place here also opened more doors for them to use that as another policy. which have a different name, and they were no more calling it slavery or enslavement, but a different name that they call colonialism. But you see, colonialism was even worse than slavery, because you make use of some of the people, you put them in offices. They are like the master, they are like the colonial master, they dress like the colonial master, they earn salaries. Commonsensically, you understand that at a point in time in Africa, Africa was rising. And to show that Africa was rising, that was why we have different empires. We have kingdoms. We have the Oyo Empire. We have the Benin Empire. We have the Dahomey Empire. We have the Malian Empire. I can go on and on and on. The Fulani Emirates and the rest of them. It shows that this kingdom were very great. And history, the Arabs wrote about them. The Europeans, the Portuguese, in their archives, they wrote about them. The Spaniards, they wrote about those kingdoms. It was great. The reason why Africa had problem was that when they came, enslaved the Africans, took them away for hundreds of years. That slavery and colonialism took place. There was no development. It was at a standstill. While Europe was developing, and the manpower they used was African manpower, the strength of Africans. And don't forget that in places like Louisiana, okay, let's use Charleston,
South Carolina.
or South Carolina. South Carolina, let's be specific, South Carolina. When you go to South Carolina, you understand, South Carolina is very similar to Africa. A lot of people were taken from Sierra Leone to South Carolina and other parts in West Africa to South Carolina, and they were skilled. In their previous country, they were planting rice. So some of those people they were taken from here, it was a skill. They became, now such people they were enslaved became very, very expensive. They already have a skill here. So when they take them to the Americas, for example, someone that is already a rice planter here, when they take them to the Americas, selling them in the auction block in places like Charleston or in South Carolina, where they have water and they have planters, they were planting rice in those areas, so they become expensive because you don't really have to train them. They already have the skill. In Louisiana, there are places that you go to in Louisiana, the balcony were made of iron, different designs of iron in the balcony. Now, people who made that there, those guys already have the skill of blacksmith here in Africa before they were taken there. So when they take such people to the auction block, they become expensive. But meanwhile, they are taking the human resources of Africa to the Americas. So why taking them away? Nobody is developing Africa. Africa remains redundant. They are developing the Americas. They developed Europe. There's a place in Liverpool called James Penny Lane. At the time, people were fighting that they should change that name from Penny. The man was called James Penny, and that area was called Penny Lane. And people were fighting that they should change that name from Penny Lane to another name. Do you know why some people were fighting? Because that man was a notorious slave trader. Okay? So Liverpool, at the time, they were building slave ships. At the time, you see a lot of black people there, but it's an irony today. When you get there, hardly will you find a black man there. By the time, everywhere you go to, there are black people that have been enslaved there. They built England. They built Europe. But why taking them away from Africa to the Americas? That time, who was building Africa? They were taking the energy. They were taking the human resource of Africa away from Africa. So Africa was redundant. But yet, we have natural resources. They took the human resources away and they came. They said they abolished the slave trade. They now brought in another policy called colonialism. So they've taken the human resources away. Now, they now began to deal with the natural resources. And they were taking our timbers away to Europe, they're taking our gold, our diamond, everything we have away. Around that time, no one was building Africa. When they said they want to civilize the people here, what was the outcome of the civilization? Ethnic strife, problem. And when you look around Africa today, it is still the same old story. So how come Africa is not developed today? Africa was dormant, was unsettled throughout the time that the slave trade took place here, throughout the time that they colonized us, and unfortunately, there are still places in Africa that are still being colonized. When I say being colonized, indirectly. In fact, it is directly, because there are some of our places in West Africa, for instance, that one, if they want to have a budget, they can't decide how much they spend. They have to go to their former colonizer, they have to give them their budget, and they decide the amount they will spend. So the same old thing is still going on in Africa. So how can Africa be developed? But yet it is possible, if only the people themselves will come together. There should be a collaboration between Africans and their children in diaspora. We should learn to forgive each other. Every ethnic group should understand that we are all one. We have one battle to fight, and individually we cannot fight it. A tribe cannot fight it. We all have to come together. We have to meet and collaborate with our cousins in diaspora. They have to come home. This is their home. And the good thing about them is that some of them found out that they have different tribes of Africa inside of them. It is good for us, but this is our home. Our politicians, our government officials, people in the corridor of power in Africa must understand that we should encourage them to come and invest. Other people are coming to invest in Africa. Some people are coming to invest in Africa from other places, other continents, but do they have the interest of Africa at hand or at heart? But our cousins, our brothers and sisters in diaspora, we encourage them, if they come and invest here and they make profit, when they make the profit, they will go and spend it in the inner city, in the black communities, wherever they come from. Either it may be Trinidad and Tobago, it may be Suriname, it may be Barbados, it may be on the street of Chicago, they may be from anywhere there. They will spend that money they make from Africa among the descendants of Africans wherever they go to, and yet they still employ us, unlike some people who come to invest in Africa and they come with their own workers who don't have the degrees that Africans have. We need our brothers in diaspora to come here more. Let them come. They should not let anybody discourage them from coming here. They are from here. This is their land. They should come and invest in this place, because when they make their money, they spend it among us in wherever they come from. It is still the same tree that is spread everywhere. We need them to come. And I'm of the opinion that when black people want to come to Africa, one, there should be no visa fee. They should not stress them from coming home, especially when they are conscious of their origin. Don't use visa fee to discourage them. Encourage them to come. And we should be there to assist them. If they want to build a house here, they want to invest here, we should not make it difficult for them, because this is home. We say welcome. We should welcome them, embrace them with an open arm, because we know the truth of the events that take place. Whatever the conspiracy against us and our cousins in diaspora, whatever it is, it won't work, because the evidences are there. We are the same. The history is there. They are trying to change the history. No, I am not an Israelite. I'm a Yoruba man from Africa. Yes, I'm an African.